Broadcasting from the Faith Bunker in a secret location, Sheep Below Ministries presents The Bunker Brothers.
We are Christian men, fathers, and husbands, but we are also former correctional officers. Just like everyone who has ever been in the first responder world, you know that it can change your view on everything.
A while back, we decided to dig into our Christianity, its people, theology, apologetics, and history. We try to do this with humor, honesty, and respect. Now, we want to include you in our conversation. I'm Daniel Audette.
And I'm Andrew Graham. And together we are
The Bunker Brothers. Graham, we are back here in... Yeah, man, I mean, I never left. Yeah, we want to be. You want to be? Graham?
Well, I do tonight.
We're sitting here in our secret location, and we have someone with us, our returning guest, and the first in-house returning guest.
That would be Mr. Tyson James.
The
Reasonable Faith.
The Tyson James.
The Tyson?
Of the Reasonable Faith.
The Tyson James.
Yes.
I think you've been promoted, Tyson.
Absolutely. Listen, the last time we saw him in the flesh was when we were at a conference at your church, and it was all about apologetics. And it was a really good conference. And I want to encourage anyone to go to apologetics conferences. It really was profound. It was fun. It was enjoyable. And you guys really did great when you did your panel questions. And we were so impressed with that. And it was a great experience all the way around.
And you guys got to interview our keynote speaker, right?
We got to talk to Ted again.
Ted Wright, the rock star of... He's our Indiana Jones of Christian archaeology right now. We think highly of him on that one. And
we had a list of questions, and I think we made it through. How are you doing tonight? And let's talk about the Exodus. We never actually exited anywhere. We never got out of Egypt, I don't think. We spent about an hour and a half talking to him about the Israelites being in Egypt, and he could have kept going.
It was fantastic.
That was one of the few times that we narrowly got out of the church before the alarm set.
And only one thing happened since we talked with him, and that there's a lady after him now, and we're worried about it, man. We're worried about because I'm saying I'm saying like, all right, I see how it is. Mm-hmm.
We won't get him back.
We were at the conference. We had a great time, and we learned a lot about apologetics. And one of the panels we got to sit in on was about memes. And we ate that up. Do you remember who did that one?
Oh,
do you remember?
You're putting me on the spot.
I think that was Matt Billieu? Or was it?
I think it might have been Matt.
Right. Yeah. And it was great. And I'm telling you, we hardly got through even a portion of the memes he had selected because it was so good. I mean, it was so good and so interesting. But how powerful are memes in our culture, really?
Oh, man. The word ubiquitous comes to mind. And
Hold on, I gotta look up.
So ubiquitous just means they're everywhere.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. So you can't go anywhere on social media without seeing some memes.
Well, I believe that's true.
Well, and the funny thing was we were talking about we couldn't make it to all the lectures that you had at the conference. You know, there were just too many going on at one time, and you couldn't make it to all of them. And we were discussing which ones we wanted to go to. And, of course, we wanted to go hear Ted speak, and we wanted to go hear you speak. And I said, if we're doing an internet ministry thing, maybe we need to go to the internet-based lecture. Yeah. It went a whole lot better than either one of us were expecting. We really enjoyed it.
Good.
And other than Ted's, it may have been our favorite conversation of the day.
Good.
Because the conversation was just amazing that flowed out of it. So we've decided to have you in to do basically that lecture again.
Oh, awesome.
Memes hit hard, and they're like the hit and run guerrilla warfare of the world.
They are.
I mean, granted, Christians can meme back, and I've seen some really good memes, but it is interesting to know how quickly a dig can be made into religion, Christianity, issues of faith, so quickly with a meme and be very convincing. And it's weird because it doesn't make me not believe, but it's like, ouch, That hurt.
Well,
how did they hit
power of
that
it-
soft spot right there on this issue and put it so succinctly? You know,
The power of it is there's no counter argument.
Right.
well,
There's
that's
no
true.
one there to point out the flaws in the argument. So if you're not looking for the flaws, and let's face it, most of us when we're scrolling through Facebook, we're not looking for an intellectual conversation.
Right.
That's not what Facebook is for. And so you get punched in the side, and you don't have the counterpoint to argue with it.
So let's look at one of the memes right now, hot off the interwebs.
Okay, so before we get into it, let me just do what I did at an apologetics conference last year where I showed this. So I'm going to have you guys take a look at the meme for a minute and then just describe what you see and how you would respond to it.
Okay, so you want to take a crack at that first, my friend?
Well, it's two maps of the world, and particular countries are highlighted in red. And above the top map, it says least religious countries. And then over the second map, it says most peaceful countries. And they're basically the same red areas on the map, implying that the least religious countries are the most peaceful countries.
I mean, it's a quick thing. It's like a side by side, can you find the missing country kind of thing. And I mean, I'm looking at that and there are some peaceful places that appear to be somewhat religious. That's interesting. It's in there. But, no, you didn't. I mean, it would appear to be like an infograph. I mean, it would appear to be like a really easy comparison. It looks very factual. Unless you mean it just, it looks pretty convincing. Man, they even got Portugal in there as read by itself as a peaceful country. I can't imagine.
And
that
that's
would
Portugal. That's amazing to me.
So, it's definitely got the idea that, hey, if you're not religious, things are cool. You're not going to have a problem.
So how would you guys respond?
Well, at first glance, I look at it and I go, all right, the biggest area of red is Canada. And then it's got a little bit of Western Europe into Scandinavia, Japan, I think, and Australia. My first comment is, well, Canada is large geographically, but there's not a lot of population. Same with Australia. There's not a lot of population there. And Australia and Japan, more than the rest of them, are geographically isolated. So they don't have a lot of new ideas coming in. They don't have a lot of new people coming in. They're kind of stagnant, not in a bad way, but stagnant civilization, so to speak.
Okay.
I think there's a lot more reasons for it to be peaceful areas than other than just religion.
Okay. So you're saying that there's not necessarily a correlation between being less religious.
That's a much better way of saying what I
Less
said
religious and
in
more
10
peaceful.
minutes.
My take is, how do we know that these are least religious countries? Number one, I don't see statistics here. I see splotches of red. What was there? Oh, there is a statistic. Oh, they managed to give someone an attribution, didn't they? Okay, so these are the least religious countries. I gotcha. And most peaceful countries. Well, I kind of take a little problem with that because last I knew, one of the nations that's on here that's very peaceful isn't even on here. It's my country. The United States is a fairly peaceful country. I mean, is Canada more peaceful than here? No. Moose attacks account for a lot of devastation. It's the truth. I'm no joke. I'm serious.
So you're questioning what the criteria of being a peaceful country even is?
Probably. Define peaceful. Define peaceful. Like, do they mean that you're not an aggressor? That you haven't ever fought anyone? Maybe. Australia was involved in World War II. Australia was involved in Middle Eastern wars. I mean, Australia was a British hold for a while. Was involved in it. So what's the basis for being peaceful? And a couple of places there don't have very good reputations on their history. They were involved in World War II. So were they peaceful? So that is a little bit odd, and really a little relative to me. That was the one I question the most.
My guess is they're using crime statistics and those kind of things.
I wonder.
That would just be my guess. But
and those are great questions to ask in an analysis of the meme.
Right. But at face value, if I was just scrolling through a person that wants to believe this, I feel, would go, see, knew it.
Yeah.
Knew it.
And that's what memes are meant to do. They're meant to draw an immediate emotional reaction or some type of quick conclusion without really digging into, the deep facts.
Right. I can see that.
So you guys pointed out some really good things.
What did we miss?
No, I say.
Well, so one of the things you pointed out was that there are some countries in there that they do have some things in their history which are not so peaceful. So what are the criteria? And that's a perfect question to ask. So let me give kind of a breakdown, a 4-step process that I kind of go through to really break down memes as much as possible.
Okay, get your pens out.
Yeah,
this is really good.
Taking notes.
Bite-sized chunks here, so...
Graham's literally reaching for a pen.
Oh, okay. I didn't know
I was just
going
going to run this
literal
later and write it down.
All right, so the first thing I look at is just the design. How is this meme designed? What's the graphic layout? Because that can tell you a lot. First of all, you've got like you said, the two world maps, one on top of the other. The top one labeled least religious countries, the bottom most peaceful countries, and then those countries are highlighted in red. Personally, if I was going for most peaceful countries, I might have chosen a different color than red.
Like green?
but
Valid
I mean,
point.
that's just the layout, okay? So that's fine. So pretty simple layout. And then the second thing I look at after the design is the content. What is it saying? Okay, so it says least religious countries and most peaceful countries. And I also noticed that in the bottom left-hand corner of each of these pictures, they actually provide a source for their information. So it's really, really tiny. So if you're just taking a glance at it, you might not actually read it. You might just skim over it or ignore it. But there are sources that they give for where they got this information, which is good, so you can go check up on it.
But who's going to take the time to double check their sources? Who
really takes the time to check on their sources? And some interesting things about that in a second. But that's the content. So there's not a lot of writing. It's very quick to read. So the third thing after design and content is, I call it the so what. Okay, so we're thinking about, let's just say that, just take it at face value. What comes out of this? Well, if there's some kind of correlation between least religious countries and most peaceful countries, at most, you can say that as countries become less religious, then they become more peaceful, given some sort of metric that, they give for peaceful.
Undefined.
Yeah. We don't know how they're
by
defining
the meme.
peaceful. Yeah. But we're Christians, and so we want to know: does this meme impact at all the truth of Christianity?
Well, I do notice it doesn't say least Christian countries; it says least religious countries.
How are we defining religious? How are we defining peaceful? It doesn't say. So you'd have to go to the sources to figure that out.
Well, one thing most of those countries have in common is they all have M&Ms. And I think that I would relabel that they're the least M&M countries and they make them more peaceful, because that would also be true. They have M&Ms. They've got M&Ms. They get M&Ms. These guys don't get as many M&Ms over here. In Asia, they don't get as many real M&Ms.
Might make them cranky.
Probably not. Might be crampy. But the facts are that, okay, so you were saying...
Yeah, I was saying, so... Let's just say that, let's take it at face value. There's a correlation between least religious countries and most peaceful countries. There's no argument here, though, that would suggest that Christianity is not true, or that even other religions aren't true. It just doesn't matter whether or not there's a correlation between religiosity and peacefulness as to whether or not the religion is true, right? Some things might be false, but believing them might have some kind of peaceful effect on you, right? Placebo effect or something like that. So we need to dig deeper if it's going to be, some kind of threat to Christianity. So far, we haven't seen any threat.
Now, what I'm hearing though is we've spent quite a few minutes talking about a very simple looking meme.
Yeah.
It doesn't take that long to really break it down into a point that you're going, okay. Even if it's accurate, okay.
Yeah.
There's a lot of other reasons there, but just scrolling through Facebook or YouTube or Instagram or whatever, somebody's going to see it and they're going to take that and make it into an argument.
Mm-hmm.
Well, least or most peaceful countries are the least religious countries. Well, that doesn't tell you anything.
Right. Yeah.
And it doesn't. It is relative to other factors too, like so least religious countries. Also, I see Ireland, one of the countries that still holds the record for the most alcohol. So I'm just saying it's an interesting thing that there are other things that impact it. Like there's other things that impact why things are what they are besides just Christianity.
Right.
And then religion. That's interesting. Some of the places that are there are very low on religion. It's funny, the least religious countries, they don't have, some countries are almost devoid of religion, where the state denies the existence of religion to a certain degree.
Yeah.
Where there isn't any. So we're talking about some deeply communist countries here that aren't even on the map.
Right.
And how would you say they're not very religious? Or that they're they're in the least religious categories. They don't even have one.
Right, but they don't show up on the
they're
most
not
peaceful.
on the most right. They're not, so there's an interesting thing.
Yeah.
So that's
that's interesting, and we'll get to that in a second. So one of the things I wanted to focus on too is our response as Christians should first and foremost be:
let's get angry, show out.
does this meme at all, even if we take it at face value, does it affect at all the truth of Christianity? Is it saying that Christianity is not true? Because if it's not saying that, then it's not. It doesn't really need to bother us as much.
At worst,
as
it's saying that Christians may not do what Christ told them to do, and well, we knew that.
Yeah, we knew that. That's not a surprise.
Yeah. The New Testament.
Usually I would say everybody in this room, but Tyson's here tonight, so I can't say that.
Aw.
So we kind of took it at face value, but I'm going to give you a couple reasons to not take it at face value. So digging a little bit deeper, if you actually count the number of countries that are highlighted in the first map and then count whether or not they're highlighted in the second map,
Interesting.
what you actually find is that when you look closely, only about half of the same countries carry over from least religious to most peaceful.
I noticed that in the Scandinavian countries.
And in Europe, a big discrepancy.
Yeah, there's a big discrepancy.
But it's really deceiving because you've got Canada
Ireland, the
highlighted.
most drunk, is still both not very religious and very peaceful.
Yeah, so you've got Canada highlighted, and you've got Australia, and those are both pretty big on the map.
Clumps.
Yeah.
And then you've got a few in Europe. And so it kind of looks the same, but when you really zoom in, they're really only half the same from top to bottom. And so the correlation, anybody that says 50% is like a high correlation, they just don't know much about correlation. That's not very good.
Well, I don't
Absolutely. I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
If it's that much difference between the two, you're losing your point there.
Right. So another thing that you guys brought up were the criteria. How are we defining peacefulness? Well, here's the problem with saying that these are the most peaceful countries. Some of these countries have terrible problems that perhaps don't show up on the peacefulness statistic. For instance, Australia has a terrible problem with alcoholism. Belgium, which shows up on there, has problems with drugs and even child euthanasia.
Right.
In Canada, there's partial birth abortion and even reports of live birth abortions that are basically murder.
Live birth abortion is not abortion.
Yes,
it's murder.
Scandinavian countries, they have high rates of drug trafficking. And then all the countries with euthanasia, they've had cases of perfectly healthy people being killed. So, these countries may not show up on the most peaceful countries list, but they certainly have problems that even if they're less religious, maybe that doesn't correlate with better lifestyle or quality of life.
Valid point, and I think that's a very interesting statistic. That when we're trying to say, what is the impact of having faith and having a faith-based life? Yeah. Some of the things you're talking about would be affected if you're least religious, but you have a major problem with lots of drugs and alcohol.
Right.
Well, there's no boast in that, because we're saying that, a faith-based approach, this Christian approach, in our case, would be might fill the gaps that you've got in your life, and you're not dependent on alcohol and drugs for your existence.
Right.
So what kind of boast is it to say you're more peaceful if you're just more the drunker?
Right,
Or
exactly.
more the problematic. So that's interesting.
Yeah,
But
and that's
you're
that
right.
quality of life that might not show up on that map. One of the things I also wanted to point out was the statistics for the most peaceful countries is relatively new. So it's modern statistics.
Oh,
So
gotcha.
that doesn't take into account the past history and what led up to their being most peaceful. Canada and Europe especially, they have a rich history of being influenced by Christianity for centuries.
True.
Yeah.
And so, how do they know that these countries aren't peaceful? Because of that lingering influence from past Christian generations. They just don't make an argument there. And in fact, there's a book by...
I actually had a similar thought, but I wasn't sure how to phrase it. And so I
I'm
didn't
here for
bring it
you,
up.
man. I'm here
But
for you.
You say things so much better than I do anyway, so I'll let you say them.
I mean, he does.
He does.
He says better than I eat. So, tip of the
He
hat.
says it in fewer words than you do.
Whatever. You're right.
There's a word called breviloquence. It's a really long word to describe speaking in very few words.
Wow.
So anyway, I was going to say...
I like the scenic route. Strap in.
I was going to say there's a book by a guy named Alvin Schmidt called How Christianity Changed the World. And he goes through just a huge amount of different areas of life where time and again we see that the influence of Christianity has brought about just enormous progress and wonderful things to the world. And so I highly suggest people check that out. One last thing about this meme is that we often hear something along these lines where people will say religion is the number one cause of war. You'll hear that from
I've
internet
heard it
atheists a lot.
before, and I baffles me because as a armchair historian, I can count literally on my hand how many struggles actually had maybe religion even at its core.
Yeah.
So few. And I looked at one person, I asked him the question, I said, which one? And honestly, you know what they named?
The Crusades.
The Crusades.
That's the only one they can go to.
They said the Crusades. And I'm
Well,
like,
and really,
it totally blew me away. World War One, no. Two, no. So no. The Boer Rebellion in China. No. Okay, let me get this straight again. And they named the Crusades.
Yeah.
The Crusades. When you had a few 20,000 or 30,000, well, 60,000 started. 20-some thousand by the time they really got there. This is not a world-changing war to happen. It wasn't even a war, barely qualifies in that way. But that's what they went to.
Right.
The Crusades was the answer.
So as you've been exposed to, you just know that this claim that religion is the number one cause of war is just false. It's just
not
absolutely
true.
false.
well, and what I've heard is they'll take somebody like Hitler and say, well, Hitler was a Christian. No, Hitler was not a Christian.
Right.
Just because he didn't like Jews doesn't make him a Christian.
Yeah.
In fact, he was anti-religion. He used it when it suited his purposes.
Well, maybe they're not aware of Dietrich Bonhoeffer
Yeah.
and the struggles that he chose to go back to that kind of Germany. Chose to. He could have stayed here in the U.S. and maintain and keep a defense of Christianity and educate young people or these students in Christianity and do so at the risk of his own life.
So there was actually in 2004 a book called Encyclopedia of Wars by Charles Phillips and Alan Axelrod, and they documented the history of recorded warfare. And from their list of 1,763 wars, only 123 have been classified as involving a religious cause.
Right.
So that's actually less than 7%
Wow.
of all wars.
Wow.
Yeah, and less than 2, and actually that accounts for less than 2% of all people killed in warfare total
Wow.
in recorded history. That's
Because
obviously
they loved
very-
again. The go-to is to say that same thing. I'm like, that's so bizarre. That one piece of history is what everything was all about, and all the rest of wars about it. And I'm pretty sure that's not true. I'm
Right.
pretty sure it's not true. And I mean, it's hard to believe that people do believe that, but you have to want to believe. Sometimes you got to want to believe something.
Yeah, and
Because
a lot of
history
these
would
people
change that.
have just sort of subconsciously absorbed these slogans,
Right.
and they just hear them and they sound cool, and they've never been challenged. And so, just digging barely beneath the surface, you find that a lot of these slogans just don't have anything to them.
Right.
And so we Christians really need to do our due diligence and not take these types of things at face value.
I love it. Let's do another one.
You want to do another one?
Yeah, I'm excited now. Now, what we got? Another one of these crazy charts, and
This goes along.
oh,
with
this is along with that one.
Yeah, so this goes
Okay.
along with the same one. So this, I looked up actually the source of the bottom part of that meme,
Right.
and what it showed was many of the same countries on the chart were highlighted, but actually China was omitted. Like when they created the meme, they took China out because it didn't really fit the narrative.
It didn't fit their narrative.
See,
And
that's
it's
what
a
I
big
mentioned. There
focal
are these
point.
countries. These countries that not only not religious, just want to be devoid of it if they can be.
Right, and nobody considers China to be, one of the most peaceful countries.
Probably not. No, not necessarily. Guarantee that. All right, so let's again another one. I want to see another one. All right, so this is an interesting one. It's in text.
I'm gonna let you describe this
I'm
one.
gonna read it. And this is really weird because it's got a long narrative text to it, and it's supposedly there's somebody slapped a name on the bottom to say it has something. Is it John Fugelsang? And is this a quote from him, or is it just?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's a quote from John Fugelsang. Okay, and they made Jesus really large type print. They want everybody to understand we said it's all about Jesus. All right, so
That
it
usually
says.
is a good way to start.
Yeah, well, it's in big print. Jesus was a radical, nonviolent revolutionary who hung around with lepers, hookers, and crooks. Wasn't American and never spoke English. Was anti-wealth, anti-death penalty, anti-public prayer. And is that Matthew 6:5? They're referencing Matthew 6:5. But was never anti-gay, never mentioned abortion or birth control, never called the poor lazy, never justified torture, never fought for tax cuts for the wealthiest Nazarenes. Funny. Never asked a leper for a copay, was a long-haired, brown-skinned, homeless, community organizing, anti-slut shaming Middle Eastern Jew. Wow. And that's basically his definition, if we're looking at, of who Jesus is. To him, that's his definition of Jesus. Graham, what you got? What you thinking about that? That's interesting.
It is interesting, and on the face of it, it sounds like Jesus. But when you dig into it, and I'll admit I've seen this one before.
Okay.
I've thought about this one.
Have you?
Yeah. But when you dig into it, about half of it you can just mark out with a broad stroke. Well, yes, he wasn't American. Nobody's ever claimed he was. He didn't speak English. Nobody's ever claimed he did.
Even though on the flannel graphs he looked like he could have put a Viking helmet on, he was not Caucasian. Truth.
Those kind of things you can, and the abortion, birth control you can mark out because they didn't exist. At least not the way we think of them now. So there's a quarter to a half of it that's already marked out. No big deal.
Okay.
Yes, I think Jesus was radical, nonviolent. Revolutionary.
Well, he was nonviolent right up until someone made him mad, and he'd flip some tables over and drive out the people and the animals
with a whip.
equally.
Yeah. Never forget, when you say, what would Jesus do? That's a possibility.
Flipping over tables and chasing people with a whip.
That's why I asked myself a WJDD. That's what would Jesse Duke do? Because that's what I'm doing. What Jesse Duke do?
Well, he carried a shotgun too.
That's what I'm saying. Anyway,
I have an issue with revolutionary.
Okay.
Yes, he was revolutionary in his ideas.
He wouldn't qualify as a revolutionary, not by the terms of.
If you're
what we
thinking
think of.
about modern revolutionaries, like the Bolsheviks and Che Guevara and those kind of people, he would not at all fit in with that category. And so if you put it in a modern context, I don't think it fits.
He never wore a beret.
He was revolutionary for his time, but I don't think it fits in the modern context and what most people would imagine when you say it.
Did he hang around with lepers, hookers, and crooks? Well, they got him on that one. But that's because he said that they're the ones that would need help. That's because he was there to help the lepers.
And that was in Matthew too.
Yeah,
but they leave out the important part of that.
What, them believing in him and getting changed and saved and all these things?
He hung around with the hookers and the crooks, but he never left one without saying, repent of your sins, do something different. He never said it's okay to be a hooker or a crook. He said, that's what you are now. Now go do better.
Now the one about wasn't American and never spoke English is just to slam the idea of the American English appropriations made concerning Christ. Unfortunately, everyone sees Jesus as looking like themselves when he was his own person. And we got to remember that God is God and he's himself. Jesus is Jesus. He's himself. And he's not what you want to make him to be. And so I get that. People Americanize him, if you want to call it that, of all things. I actually know a church one time that didn't want bulletins because they didn't want pictures of Jesus with long hair. And I'm not saying he had long hair. I don't know what kind of hair he did have. I know he had maybe hair. I don't know. I'm pretty well sure.
He may not have had hair.
But the issue is that, I get that. That's a rightful slam.
That would be disappointing.
That's where a little bit of truth is being woven into untruth there.
It's truth, but who cares? Nobody's ever claimed he was American.
Was he anti-wealth? He told one guy to sell all he had, but he did it for a reason. Matthew, the tax collector, he never told him to sell all he had. Matthew said, I'll make it straight. I know I skimmed the profits. That's how he made money as a tax collector. Literally, the word farming out came from tax collectors at that time. But he didn't hate people because they were rich. That wasn't something, it wasn't really anti-wealth.
They try to quote the Bible in saying that the money is the root of all evil. That's not what it says. It says the love of money is the root of all evil.
Right.
He wasn't anti-money. He was anti-putting money before everything else. Right.
In Fiddler on the Roof, there's a famous section there where the main character is talking about that God, one of the things that they believed in their community. Again, this is not a truth necessarily about the Jewish community. It's a play. But he does say something that's very funny, and that is that God curses rich people with money. That's their curse. And he said, God, if that's the case, curse me. Curse me, God. Because then he'd have money for his family. Anti-death penalty, I would highly doubt that. He was Jewish and he believed in the law. He understood that there was a role that the penalty for acts might require a death penalty. I'm not saying he was anti that. If he was, he probably wouldn't have let his first major convert die on a cross with him. I'm just like, he knew the guy was there. And he knew why the guy was there. And the guy said he deserved to be there. I mean, look it up. It's there. He's like, I know what I did. I know why I'm up there. That's the thief's own word. I know what's going on. I know why. In fact, my thing about him is that my big impression on him is that he proved his faith because he would continue to suffer even though Christ would go ahead and die and give up his spirit. He would continue to suffer till more than the other guy and have his legs broken before he finally died from asphyxiation, and did so without giving up the faith in the man who was right next to him that died earlier on. He suffered far more than Christ did physically. That's not fair, people will say. Oh, but it is true, because Christ didn't have his legs broken. He didn't die in the same way. Christ had his own suffering, but this man suffered in his body in a tremendous way, and he did so because he believed in Jesus Christ. After that, he could do that. I mean,
you skipped the most interesting
which one? Well, what? Anti-public prayer?
Anti-death penalty.
Oh.
You did that death one. But Matthew 6:5, where what they're quoting says, and when you pray, you must not be like the hypocrites, for they love to stand and pray in the synagogues and at the street corners, that they may be seen by others. Truly I say to you, they have received their reward.
It goes on. When you pray, go into your room and shut the door.
But that's not what
and pray to your Father who is in secret. And we're talking about a life of prayer. There's times for public prayer, but the daily life of prayer is what he's talking about here. It's not for show. Prayer is not for show. So that's what's done. Now, okay, so we pull apart each one. Never mentioned abortion or birth control. And
again, they didn't exist in the context that we're thinking of them.
That's true. They didn't abort the infants that were excavated from behind the brothels in Corinth that were just dumped out there to die. They didn't abort them. They just dumped him out there to die.
Right.
So yeah, they didn't bother to abort him. They just dumped him out there. It was not much improvement in aborting a child, but infanticide was certainly going on. Jesus was well. I think the people imagined Jesus wasn't aware of his world he was in. Really, I mean, I think they were very well aware.
I'm just trying to look at it as a modern person, just scrolling through Facebook and reading it at face value.
Do you say the poor were lazy? No, because you're always going to have some.
Yeah.
Was that nice of him? He told people you can give money to him all day long. There will still be people there to give money to. Do not worry.
Yeah.
I mean, he didn't tell you don't do it. He just said there will always be someone who is in need. He came from a culture that believed if you didn't train your child how to have a career by the time he was like 12, 11, 12, you were called a father of thieves openly by everybody. That was the culture he lived in.
So just real quick before you jump into the rest, I just wanted to point out that this is one meme. And just analyzing
it really
what
is
we
thick.
have so far, you guys have talked about this for probably at least 20 minutes already.
Yeah.
Just on a few lines of text.
It looks like it. I'm sorry.
That's the power of a meme.
Yeah.
Is that you can draw out, a lot of.
But how long did it take him to read it straight through?
Not long.
30 seconds.
Yeah, not
if
long.
that.
Yeah.
And that's what most people are going to do.
Right.
And they're just going to assume that everything there is true.
Yeah.
We don't have to keep going through it. I think we've made our point.
So, it would take probably, another hour to get through the rest of the points there. But let me just point out
I think he's saying we talk too much.
Well, I talk too much.
No, you guys were doing great. So
anti-slut shaming, of course, because he didn't stone her to death.
So that's actually not in the earliest manuscripts. But anyway. So going back to how I break down memes. So let me just go through those 4 steps again. So we look at the design. It's just a wall of text, and it's in black and white, and all of the text is in capital letters. So it stands out. All the text is like
I didn't even notice that it was all in capital letters.
Yeah.
Right. It's kind of
really,
loud.
You may not even notice, but it's like punching you in the face with the boldness of the text. So it's just a wall of text, and so you have to kind of get past that. It's all justified.
You know how spacing even changes?
Yeah.
Spacing gets narrower as it gets further. I mean,
the text is all justified so that it lines up on both sides. So that's and then it's got the John Fugel saying at the bottom, and we'll talk about that in a second. It gives several claims about what Jesus was and wasn't. Okay, some of them you'll agree with, some of them you won't, based on your background knowledge of who Jesus was and what you know of the Bible. And then one thing that I want to point out is that if you look up John Fugelsang, he's an American actor and comedian who was really vocal against Trump and against Trump's support by Christians, especially during the 2016 election. So this was part of his criticism of American Christians who supported Trump. So the third step, so I went through the design and the content, and then the third step is to ask, so what? Right? Let's just take it at face value. Okay? So he gives all of these descriptions about what Jesus was and wasn't. So we ask as Christians, what comes out of this? Does this affect the truth of Christianity at all? Does it in any way suggest that Jesus wasn't a real person who was crucified and rose 3 days later?
No, it seems like they're attacking Christians, not Christianity.
Right. So first and foremost, we need to understand that this doesn't need to shake our faith in Jesus Christ. No. Right? At most, like you said, it should make us question Christians and their positions on things. But we can go even further than that, right? So that's getting past the initial sticker shock of the meme. The thing we notice first and foremost, I think, is that he's appropriating Jesus for political purposes, right? These are all...
And that's very obvious.
These are all political hot topics.
Well, there's copay and there's...
The
all these are different things.
language is very...
You've got anti-death penalty, anti-wealth. I mean, it's just... Like, you see a lot of maybe socialism, like trying to make Jesus into like a socialist, maybe.
Right, definitely on the liberal end of the political spectrum.
And there's a political view of that's what. But I get what they're saying,
Yeah,
trying to do that.
One thing that you'll notice is that there are several arguments from silence here, or implied arguments from silence, saying that Jesus never he never mentioned abortion or birth control. He never called the poor lazy. So that's meant to imply that the opposite, right? That Jesus was for abortion or for birth control, or that he wouldn't have a problem with it. But just because he didn't explicitly talk about something does not in any way mean that he would support their modern incarnations.
Right.
Right? So those are arguments from silence. I do want to point out that there are, as you guys said, several points that we can agree with, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It makes sense. The idea. I know that them saying down here, long-haired, got it. That's a smack on traditionalists, short hair, and brown-skinned.
Most likely, right? He's Middle Eastern.
Yeah,
that's meant to smack with the idea.
I have no issue with that.
Yeah.
And I like the way the first line and the last line are both things we'll agree with.
Yeah.
He was a radical, nonviolent. Okay, I can agree with that.
But I also want to say that back in his time, it wasn't the Middle East.
Yeah.
There was no Middle
Well,
East.
that's true.
Yeah.
But in our context, he is a Middle Eastern Jew.
Yeah.
Okay, so what?
Yeah, so I think that's important for
We
Christians to
don't
recognize
disagree with that.
is that when we're looking at memes and analyze them, we just go ahead and agree with what we can agree with, right? Don't be afraid to agree with
Absolutely.
what's true.
Right.
The point, though, is that you want to make sure that what you're agreeing with is true, right?
Sure.
A lot of the points are just contextually irrelevant, like copays. Like that has absolutely nothing to do with Jesus's time. So why is that even being brought into the picture?
I think it's interesting that they would talk about that society had no provision for anyone for anything. Romans, there was no social security. There was definitely nothing. If you were poor or you were sick, you got in the corner and you begged for every penny you could get to even make sure you had bread in your face.
Yeah.
And that's what you did day in, day out. That was it. This was not a generous society that by the way, most Christian societies are also generous societies. Just going to say that.
Yeah, like the book I
overseas,
was talking about.
Overseas, some of the people will say one of the amazing things about Christians is when a disaster happens, they can count on the Christians to come with relief.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because some of the countries we've gone to do relief in, their religious systems prevent them from helping anyone.
Yeah.
I'm being honest. There are some religious systems that to help someone is to karmically damage them because they won't learn from what's going on. So you wouldn't want to help them because you're karmically damaging them and they won't learn. So that loop logic, you never help anybody. You don't help them.
Yeah, you actually have incentives to not help people sometimes.
You're helping them and not helping them.
Yeah.
And it's like, Christians are like, oh, cool. You want something to eat? You need a blanket?
Yeah, so we notice that there's a few things in there that are just contextually irrelevant to Jesus' time. Another thing is that, John Fugelsang, he's a well-known, anti-religious guy, comedian, actor, critic of Christianity.
What makes and I say this about a lot of things, but what makes a comedian, actor, an expert on anything other than comedy and acting?
Right. So, I don't want to say that actors and comedians can't speak knowledgeably on certain subjects, right?
No, as long as they agree with me, they're fine.
But what I do want to suggest is that this type of meme probably doesn't indicate that he's very serious about anything that Jesus actually taught.
Right.
I don't think
it's very tongue-in-cheek.
Yeah.
It's meant to pick. It's meant to get your attention. It's meant to be what it is.
Right. So, something that you could ask someone who posts something like this is, well, do you take what Jesus said seriously? How about the other things that he said, like, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but by me.
Right.
Are you going to take that as seriously as these other things that Jesus supposedly was about?
And when you go to that point, you come to the anti-gay and the birth control and those things, and Jesus quoted Deuteronomy more than any other book in the Old Testament. So apparently he took it fairly seriously.
Oh, yeah.
So let's see what Deuteronomy's got to say about it. And then we'll figure out what Jesus thought about it.
Yeah. The last thing I wanted to say about this meme is that it's obvious. It's obviously an appropriation of Jesus for political purposes.
Right.
Okay, we said that before, and I want to say that politics is often a huge distraction for Christians.
It is.
And it can get in the way of spiritual maturity. And I want Christians to have a greater focus on evangelism, especially when they're conducting themselves online. We have to understand that we're always under a microscope when we're acting publicly with people online or in our everyday lives. And so politics is one of those areas that can be a huge blind spot for Christians. Strategically, I think what we want to do is drive the conversation to whether or not Christianity is true. Okay, then we can talk about the implications for all of these political hot topics. Because if Christianity isn't true, then what significance does it have to whether or not, the death penalty or wealth or public prayer? What difference does it make to any of those things if Christianity isn't true in the first place?
Right. I mean, and my father was one of those guys who would say something like, a lot when it came to politics, my dad believed that if you really want to change your world, then you change the heart. Because if you change enough hearts, then you've changed your world. You're gonna move it in the right direction by bringing it to Christ.
Yeah.
Every person you bring to Christ is going to move the world slightly in a little bit better direction.
Yeah.
Because then there's a person who can say, "Hey, this is what I believe," or make that moral next right choice on issues.
Yeah.
And we look way too much toward politics to save us when we know better than that.
Yeah.
But yet, not being involved is also a mistake. But being overly involved, like you're saying, getting distracted with it, is probably also bad. People tend to be extremes. Very rarely are we very well balanced. Hard to balance.
Yeah. So I think we picked that one to death.
Woo! I think so. I went for a hook, line, and sinker.
All right,
My
I
bad.
like
I'll
this
have
one
to edit
already.
half of what I said. I can save that stuff later.
I like this one already because it's got Batman in it.
Why don't you read this one?
I don't
Can you see
know
it?
what to read. I can see the gray part. The blue part's a little difficult.
Here, let me hold this book so you can see it, old timer.
Let's see. All right, it's a text message picture.
Yeah.
I guess is the best way to describe that.
Screenshot, sure.
Wow.
It starts.
Text message picture.
Yeah, it works. I'm wondering what
I make
their.
art on Stonewall.
I hate to get sidetracked, but I'm wondering what their little Batman icon at the top of the picture is.
Squirrel.
I happen to be a Batman fan, so anyway, it says, "Kay, then how about this? Batman versus God." And the person in blue says, "Batman blank easily." I'm assuming that's getting rid of a
Yeah, that was
foul
censored.
language.
Yeah.
And then the person in gray says, "Oh, yeah, okay, LOL." And then we get a long blue quotation that says, "Batman would explain to God that an omniscient being's power is absolute. By definition, God literally knows everything, past, present, and future, and can do anything. He is omniscient. So then Batman would challenge God to create information which God didn't know beforehand. If God knows all, how can he create something he doesn't know? If he can do all, why can't he do this task? God would realize omniscience is a paradox and that he actually doesn't exist. He's just Alfred in a fake white beard." They both chuckle as Batman backflips to his computer to do science. And then another blank and you. This is the "can God create a rock too heavy for God to lift" thing.
Okay.
Rephrased, and they blasphemously used Batman to do it.
Okay, so how would you respond?
That question has always seemed silly to me. And I don't know why. It just I can't explain why it seems silly.
Just
And
intuitively.
It just seems silly. I mean, I don't remember who I heard say it, but somebody I was listening to said that, there are things that God couldn't create because definitionally they can't exist. Those things would be the paradox, i.e. a married bachelor.
Yeah.
You can't do that.
Right.
Because definitionally, it doesn't work, or ceremonially for that matter.
I've never lived that down. I couldn't say that word.
It was one of our
It
first
was funny.
episodes. We've got to bring it up every
Yes,
once in a
it
while.
was crazy.
So there are certain things that just can't exist.
Yeah.
Logically, they can't exist, I guess, is the best way to say that.
Yeah,
Your take, Alfred?
Well, I mean, I mean, it's so weird to demand something, to produce something, to prove its own existence. It's just so weird.
Yeah,
right?
first of all, it assumes God's existence to be able to have this interaction.
I mean, the proof I have a copier is because I demanded all the parts to make a copy.
Yeah.
I don't understand how, and it sounds so logical because you want to say God can do anything. That's the trigger. That's kind of that's the trip line that really gets you here. And if you're hitting that trip line and you're feeling hurt by this, that's the trip line. It's the one. It's the sucker spot.
Yeah.
Because you want to say, well, God can do anything, and you want to argue that point. Well, you want to believe God can do anything, then here's what proves God can't. And my thing I think is, well, would God want to? What would be the purpose of this? And the other thing is, that it's really asking the wrong set of questions. It really putting your mind into defining God in this case, by a set of physical parameters that are different. I don't know if anybody knows, he's not like us. He could he make a rock that he can't pick up, and that proves that he's not who he is? You're asking someone who exists well beyond levels of physical matter to worry about picking up a rock. It's like, okay, that's funny. I mean, but that's one of those things, like, and it is illogical, Graham. I mean, it doesn't make sense. But it's a good one. It's a good one. I've heard it before. But I mean, if God can't make a rock he can't pick up, then does that make God not exist? When he invented the entire planet?
And I
think he could pretty well pick up most rocks, right?
I find it funny that they said God would realize he doesn't exist and that he is Alfred in a long white beard.
Yeah.
If he doesn't exist, then he's not anything.
Yeah.
They're even after quote unquote proving their point, because nobody can see me doing air quotes. After quote proving their point, they even still assume that God exists.
And also, we got to separate out.
It's funny to me.
We got to separate out the idea of God being all powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's all powerful, as in he can do anything. Yeah, he's all knowing, as in he knows everything. But how would he produce information he didn't know to prove his own existence? That's idiocy.
Yeah. Yeah. So you guys are hitting on the right stuff. And so
okay, now you tell us the real right stuff. I like how Tyson never talks down to us.
let me just pretty it up a little bit.
Please.
So first of all, going through real quickly the...
And we're rolling. Here we go.
Okay. So the first thing is the design. It's a text message screenshot, which is already kind of attractive because it looks like something we would look at on our phone.
It's a fun conversation.
Yeah, and you're kind of like, it's voyeurism, right? It's looking in on somebody's private conversation.
Listen at you with all your techno lingo.
So it's kind of attractive. The content, it's in text form, hypothetical conversation between two guys about Batman and God, which popular characters, so it's going to attract your attention like it did Graham here. And it presents an omniscience paradox meant to show that the concept of God is incoherent. It just doesn't make sense. And therefore, Batman wins by default, right? Now, unlike the previous memes we looked at, this one would have some serious consequences for Christianity if true, right?
Yeah,
if this
absolutely.
goes through and the idea of God is incoherent or leads to a paradox or logical incoherence, then God doesn't exist, right? Logically incoherent things don't exist. Like
let's start with Batman not existing. Start with that.
But like married bachelors can't exist, right? Round squares can't exist.
Those are just juxtapositions of different terms that just counter each other because of their existence. They're not reality-based objects.
Right.
I'm saying.
Right. And so,
like Batman.
Jumbo shrimp.
So the way to respond to this, these types of paradoxes trade on a lack of clear definition. When you clearly define your terms, though, a lot of these paradoxes just go away. So Christians really need to get a firm grasp on what omnipotence means. Okay, omnipotence shouldn't just be defined as God can do anything, right? Because if you can name it, then God should be able to do it. You need to get a better definition, and the definition that most good theologians and philosophers will go with is that God can do anything that is logically possible to do. Okay, logically possible.
Because we can agree that he is above all logical.
Right.
I mean, his
Yeah.
wisdom is very well touted in Scripture.
Yeah.
The fact that there are some things that, why would he do it? Because that doesn't make sense, and I'm smarter than that.
Yeah. Jesus,
I mean, you know what I'm
John
saying?
1:1.
He's smarter than
Jesus is the Logos.
Right.
Right?
Right.
He is the source and ground of reason and logic.
Exactly.
So God can do anything that
Technicality.
is logically possible.
Right.
And what that helps us do is see that when you encounter something that's logically absurd, it doesn't count against God to not be able to do it. So going back to the question that you asked, can God create a rock that is too big for him to lift? Well, God, by definition, being omnipotent, can lift all created things.
Sure.
So a rock that's too big for God to lift is a logically incoherent thing.
Right.
And what we want to say is...
Maybe that's why it just seemed
Yeah.
nutty to me to start with.
So we need to say that God can do anything that's logically possible to do anything, but that certain things that we can put to words aren't actually things.
Right.
Right? A rock that's too big for God to lift is not
a
a thing.
thing.
A married
Right.
bachelor is not a thing, right? So
Right.
that's not something that God should be logically able to do. So we need to clearly define what omnipotence is, and that shows that this call to create information that God didn't know ahead of time is logically incoherent, because by definition, God is omniscient, right?
Right.
If God knows all things, past, present, and future, then he can't logically, it's logically incoherent to say that he could create information that he doesn't know. It's saying that an omniscient being is not omniscient.
Well, if I was going to try and move that conversation to something toward Christ, you know, it might. I know what I would do. I said, well, you know, Jesus, when he was here on earth, was limited to a physical body, and there were limitations of that body. They accepted by being here. And you'll note when he rose from the dead, angels rolled the stone away from him. So yeah, God can make a rock. He can't move.
In his human
Just say it.
nature. Yeah.
Just say it.
That-
Just say it.
Wow.
And then we can talk about Jesus' resurrection.
I'm
Yeah,
good
I'm
with
say
that.
it. I mean, I'm not saying. I mean, but it's a matter of it. It sounds like a really good argument, but it'd be like saying, "Hey, drive that car without a tire." Why would you do that? How would you do it? Why would you do it? But it's illogical because of the basis of who it is, what it is.
Right. And that's why I
Why
think
would
it's-
you make a demand of it that
Yeah.
doesn't make no sense?
That's why I think it's really important for this type of meme anyway, that Christians have a stronger grasp of philosophy and logic. It's kind of strange. Which of you, if either of you have, were required to take logic in high school?
Not in high school. I took a logic class in college.
my
I
logic,
bombed it.
my logic class came pretty well in my dad's belt.
Right. So it wasn't a
Logic.
class that you had to take in high school.
Probably not. No.
Right. So
Critical thinking, is the closest they came to that, and that was really just believing everything they said.
And I think if we're going to have Christians in our churches that are able to respond to these types of memes, we're going to have to teach critical thinking in our churches more. One person said that a church is always more than a school, but it's never less than a school. And I think that's absolutely right.
That's interesting.
And I think the big thing, again, is having a church where people can ask the questions that people will say they shouldn't ask. You know, people are sometimes afraid to ask certain questions, or they don't want to appear blasphemous. They don't want to be accused of being faithless and not having faith. So they just never ask the questions. When the atmosphere of freedom is not there to ask the question. I had a gentleman ask me today some very simple questions. To me, they're almost bizarre the way they came across to me, because I would think, oh, well, this is kind of obvious. But for him, he had never, in his religious experience, asked those questions because he could not, or did not feel comfortable in asking those questions. But he could ask it to me, because I mean, I'm not going to judge him. And he knows that.
And that's why
so,
the conference that you guys came to my church, we really left a lot of time for open Q&A, right? Especially asking...
Which I really tried to be intelligent at. I try so hard.
And I'll admit there were some of those questions that people asked that I've heard so many times. It was just like, really, you want to do this again? And I sometimes when you start studying this stuff, you forget that not everybody has studied this stuff in depth or at all.
Yeah.
And so to them, the omniscience question seems logical. Mm-hmm. And you're sitting back there in the back of the room going, really, we're going to do this again? Yeah. I just did this Tuesday. Man.
Working for reasonable faith.
I was going to say, do you ever get tired of answering the same questions?
I mean, I'm fielding the same dozen questions like over and over again every day.
You've heard Ravi Zacharias. Yeah. Every speech he gives, he says, I can write down the 25 questions I'm going to get every show.
Yeah.
He said, because I get the same 25 questions every show. And everybody thinks they're brilliant for coming up with it.
And when I get to talk to these guys, I usually ask the same questions. And the reason I do is because I'm curious to see how they're going to answer those same questions. Mm-hmm. Because they're the ones people do ask. Yeah. It's the ones that they've been trained to ask by the other sides of things. Yeah. Because they're the ones that makes them tick. They love it. They love seeing people get in a paradox because then... they can't make logical sense of what they got in their head, then they can believe, oh, well, that means God's illogical. Well, a human can be confused. Yeah. I mean, Billy Graham himself, when he was younger, was it Templeton, I think, a guy that one time debated with him or talked to him, and Billy Graham himself was absolutely baffled. He said, if anybody could have maybe not believed, it was him. Yeah. Mm-hmm. He went out in the woods, Billy Graham went out in the woods, laid his Bible on a stump and began to pray. He said, God, I choose to accept that this is the word that you want. This is the truth that you want for me. I choose to accept that your word is inerrant, that you know what's best for me. And after that moment, when he went out and started doing crusades, he went out, for maybe 2 or a couple of weeks out, and was it Los Angeles? I forgot, I remember what was that. Oh, it turned into 5 weeks, because people were coming in droves to Jesus Christ and getting saved. And it was a big, major deal. And he attributed that incident as what propelled his ministry forward. He had already been preaching and doing things, and this guy had some really good arguments, really good things about questioning what you believed, the truth of the Bible, the legitimacy of the Word of God. And Billy Graham was like, but here's the result was, when he put his faith on the line, God was there. Yeah. And I think that's the thing. And again, as you've said before, that faith is not just taking that leap out into nowhere. Right. Not really your words, my words, but that it is, as you said, reasonable faith. Yeah. That there's a good reason to have faith about this, huh? But I found, like I said, I took that leap when I was younger, and I found that there was something I landed on that was quite solid. It made good sense. And it did have a profound side. It did have a miraculous side. It did have a powerful side. However, it also had a reasonable, logical side. Yeah. It makes sense. Yeah. People will say, well, God, concerning miracles, they'll say, well, you can't do those things. Well, really? Tell me. Well, I know he can. But isn't it logical that he could if he wanted to? And I love people say, God doesn't heal. Been healed, been prayed for by the brethren and been healed by God. I love the miracle. So you're telling me God can't do that? And they go, whoa, I'm not saying God can't. So then that's all I needed. Yeah. We don't need it. There's no argument from me. You're just saying that God can do what he wants. I'm good with that. Now we're done. So
that's what I say.
Yeah.
But I like the miracle question, especially when they bring up, how does he make a snake talk? And how does he make a donkey talk? Or those things don't really happen. I went, well, if they happened, it wouldn't be a miracle. It wouldn't be noteworthy if that happened all the time.
Yeah. I like this follow-up question. What's the greatest miracle in the Bible?
I know the answer to this.
We know the answer.
No. It was King Solomon keeping 300 some odd wives and 300 some odd concubines happy.
No.
I'm telling you,
you're wrong.
That's a miracle.
You're wrong. It's getting Matthew the tax collector and Simon the zealot to sit in the same room and not kill each other.
So what you'll usually get...
But creation is the greatest.
Yeah, absolutely. So most Christians will say, the resurrection or turning water into wine.
And the resurrection is a pretty good one.
Turning water into wine is pretty good. But
only if you're Presbyterian.
Yeah. So, but yeah, the answer is creating the entire universe out of, from nothing, right?
The very first sentence.
If God can create the
I know
universe,
ex nihilo just is awesome, isn't it?
Yeah, so if God can create the universe out of nothing, then making a snake talk or donkey talk is child's play.
Yeah, it ain't nothing.
But yeah, when you stop and think about it, if it happened all the time, it wouldn't be worth noting.
Oh, Balaam.
Why is the resurrection a great miracle? Because we don't see it happen.
So memes, right? Super powerful. Graham, we're gonna take a break right now, aren't we? We'll be back with more of Tyson James. Got his name right, Tyson James. After this break.
Hey guys, this is Andrew Graham, and yes, I am one of the Bunker Brothers. I want to take a minute or two and tell you about the Faith Bunker. Before we started all these crazy things that we do, I was in a bad spiral of depression. I was on the verge of doing something eternally stupid. So I called my buddy, Mr. Daniel Audette, the other Bunker Brother, and I said, hey man, let's read the Bible together next year. That would have been 2019. I said, I've never read all the way through it. I feel like it would do me some good right now. It can't hurt anything. And I know me, if I start it and I don't have anybody doing it with me, I won't make it. I probably wouldn't make it out of the first few chapters of Genesis, to be real honest. I needed somebody to hold me accountable. So, a couple days later, he agreed. A couple days later, he called me back and he said, hey Graham, by the way, I just wanted to let you know I started a Facebook page. And I said, you did what? And why did you do that? And he said, well, I figured if you and I were going to do it, there might be other guys out there that wanted to read with us. He said, it won't take much time. It'll just be, a reading prompt every day. Maybe something about what we're reading. It'll take a few minutes a day. We'll be done with it. Right. Nothing Daniel does takes a few minutes a day. So, we set up the Faith Bunker. It is now on Facebook. It is now on Twitter. It is now the basis of Bunker Brothers podcasts. We are now a part of the larger ministry group known as Sheep Below Ministries. But really, it's a simple concept, even with over 200 members at this point. We read the Bible. That's what we do. We read it through straight in a year. How do you get involved with Faith Bunker? It's really, really simple. Number one, you must be a man. Sorry, ladies, but this is a men's Bible study group. If you're interested in starting a women's Bible study group, that's great. Get up with Sheep Below Ministries at sheepbelowministries@gmail.com. They'll be glad to work with you on that. But you must be a man. You must go to Facebook and or Twitter, and you must ask to join the page. Assuming you meet all those qualifications, they're going to let you in. They want people to read the Bible with them. So that's really as complicated as it gets. And on top of that, you get to tell everybody that you are a Bunker Brother.
We are back from the break, and we're here with
Tyson James.
And what are we discussing?
Memes.
Well, I knew that.
Memes.
You
Yeah.
guys are turning the tables on me.
We're throwing a curveball out here. Graham, what you got for us here?
Okay, I like this one because it is very simple.
Let's do like him, like he does. So you see this meme here, and we're gonna have you look at it and react to it. Now, what you see? What
I
do you
don't
see?
sound like that. I'm insulted.
Me too, because I did a terrible impression. I was just trying to sound intelligent.
I'm sorry for just being in the same room.
I was just trying to sound intelligent, you know what I'm saying?
All right, so you're turning the tables on me. I have to describe this meme. All right, it is a picture of a bear, and he looks really sullen, and he's leaning over a log. And there
He came up with the word sullen off the top of his head.
And there is all caps text, white text that says, anytime I hear someone is religious, I automatically think of them as less intelligent. Oh. All right, so
Are we sure that's a bear?
yes,
That was my first instinct, but I'm not. Anyway,
That's actually a
It doesn't matter.
California bear.
Wow. Tyson. Gee.
So what I would do, the first thing I would do is go through my list of analyzing how I analyze memes. So the first thing is just the design. It's just a picture of a bear, obviously making sort of a sad-looking face. And he says, anytime I hear someone is religious, I automatically think of them as less intelligent. The first thing I would say is, so what? What, like, if I take this at face value, does this have any significance at all? It doesn't give any argument against religion or Christianity in particular. It doesn't affect my faith in the least. At most, what I would say is this is a statement of personal psychological state, right? This person says, anytime I hear someone is religious, I automatically think of them as less intelligent. Well, this person obviously hasn't encountered some of the greatest minds who are religious.
well, and probably some of the people they're thinking of are religious.
Maybe in their own personal, small sphere of people.
Yeah, I know some nuts.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm sitting here,
And I think there are intelligent and non-intelligent people in most groups.
In all
people.
circles,
Yeah. But I work with brilliant people who are religious.
We know.
I mean, just to name one, Dr. William Lane Craig. 2 doctorates and
he's impressive. I mean, he's impressive.
Yeah.
I mean, and I'm thankful that God has people like that with that kind of brains.
Yeah. So I
Thank
wonder,
God makes people like me.
So, you have to ask this person if they're familiar with, some of the most brilliant Christian minds out there, like Dr. Craig, Alvin Plantinga, the Christian scientists who are doing phenomenal work in their fields. Are they familiar with...
That is not to say the...
Yeah.
The Christian scientists. We don't mean the religious group.
Scientists.
I want to make sure that was clear. We're not talking about them.
Yeah, we mean Christians in the academy
we mean capital C and little s.
Yeah. So, the founder of the Big Bang, the priest, Lemaitre, are they familiar with these people? Probably not. So it might help Christians being confronted with this meme to familiarize themselves with the list of Christians who have contributed to major academic fields.
And my question for someone who would say this or post this is, what gives you the authority to decide one way or the other? Yeah. Unless you're somebody on the level of William Lane Craig, what gives you the right to determine whether somebody's intelligent or not?
Yeah.
That's my gut instinct. And
Okay. That was a good curveball, and he smacked it right out of the ballpark. Let's throw him a knuckleball. Is there such a thing?
One more thing before we move
whoa.
on. Another thing I would say is when
More about the bear?
Yeah, one more.
The California bear?
So that's a really good opportunity when somebody posts a meme like that to ask them if they're familiar with arguments for the existence of God. If they're not even able to articulate the strongest Christian position, then who are they to say that Christians are unintelligent? That's the
Valid
challenge
point.
that you can raise.
Valid
Okay, I like this one.
Okay.
All
right.
Oh, this is a good one.
All right. So all right. So the meme is it's almost like a chalkboard kind of look to it. It's all dark, and then in all caps it says, "Here's a list of scientific discoveries that were later proven wrong using religion," and then colon, and then a numbered list of 10 with nothing beside each number. So basically, it's implying that there have been no scientific discoveries that were later proven wrong using religion. So the idea is that religion doesn't actually give us any knowledge, and science is the main, source of knowledge, and that eventually religion will just be obsolete because we'll have scientific knowledge take over.
Galileo said that the Word of God shows you the way to heaven, but not the way of the heavens, or the way the heavens go.
Yeah.
And I like that quote from Galileo. He was like, the purpose of the Word of God is. I'm sorry. I'm
How
doing
to
your
go
job.
to-
I'm sorry.
yeah.
I'm doing his job.
You're doing a
So
fine
what
job.
would you say about that, sir?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So again, the design very simple. The content, it's trying to imply that science gives us knowledge, religion doesn't, and eventually religion will be pushed out with all scientific discovery. The problem is that some of our strongest arguments for the existence of God are based on the greatest scientific, most solid scientific discoveries we have. So, for instance, the Kalam cosmological argument. It says everything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist. Therefore, the universe has a cause. That second premise, that the universe began to exist, has the strongest scientific support of almost any claim that you can make in religious arguments.
Right.
The time and again, the evidence has shown that the universe is finite in the past. And so science actually gives us support for a premise in a philosophical argument for the existence of God. And so what these people don't understand is that the very best scientific evidence we have is helping us to make the strongest case ever that God exists.
I think it also promotes the misunderstanding that religion has darkened understanding, and that plays upon the misunderstanding of history and the role the church has played in history concerning discovery.
Yeah.
And I feel that that's often played upon, especially by just using the word, quote, the Dark Ages, which we know was not a lot got written in Latin, and the invaders were destroying every library they could find because they couldn't read those books and didn't care what was in it. They lost the secret to concrete for a couple hundred years thanks to that. I think
He's
about
obsessed
that.
with. He talked to Ted
Roman
about
concrete?
this for about 20 minutes.
But it had nothing to do. Well, the Dark Ages, our church suppressed knowledge, and the reality is, no. There was architectural advances. There was medical advances.
Yeah.
There was genetic research advances done by a monk. I mean, that wasn't being suppressed in that way. That idea that religion darkens is not true, especially since a majority of the early scientists did what they did, as an expression of trying to understand and experience the world that God had made.
Yeah.
And they did it with that honor toward learning more about God. That is what drove them to discover. In other words, some discoveries were done because they were compelled to learn more about God through looking at the world around them.
Absolutely.
So
I
it
heard the same
resulted.
claim. Yeah,
But it happened.
even
It's
some
amazing.
charitable
Not everyone,
atheists-
but some.
Even some charitable atheists have admitted
Hmm.
that because Christians believed that the universe was intelligible,
Mm-hmm.
because it was created by a transcendent mind,
Mm-hmm.
that it propelled them to scientific discovery, and that other cultures like Eastern cultures, where there is no transcendent mind behind the universe, that that view of reality actually stalled scientific discovery.
Well, and that is a good point. You can have something that can stall it. I mean, that happens in technology itself. So without going into a separate topic, it's okay. Like, okay, now in Latin America,
I've heard all of his stories.
Okay, no, seriously,
I
no,
know
no,
exactly
no.
where he's going.
But I'm saying it actually can happen that way.
Yeah.
Motivation can stall because you're willing to believe that everything just is going to happen. And it happens in some cultures where it's just whatever the will of God is, so they're not going to try and turn it back or explore other options. Whereas you have cultures who, we're going to look at some options. We're going to think about this, and that's not to pick on any different culture, because some of the wisest cultures come out of regions that were able to think about things critically and look at it. And there's quite a few cultures like that. But there's some that their own religious principle held them back.
Right.
And that's a reality. There are some like that in the world still today, where the freedom to explore. In Christianity, there is the freedom to explore, and that's part of what we experience today. The modern world we live in, with the advances we've made, is because we've helped to create a freedom that allows a person to think.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people who would post this type of meme just aren't really aware of the open intellectual environment that Christianity was able to help found throughout the centuries. They're just not aware of those contributions. Sorry.
No, you're fine.
Um,
I can tell you what Ted Wright would say about archaeology and Christianity.
I can't
because the
we were all
the
at the
interest
same
in
conference, so
the
we all
interest
heard
in
it.
Christianity concerning archaeology became the foundation for what became archaeology.
Right.
Granted, it had to get fine tuned, and some people were just treasure hunters. We get
Don't
that. There's
say
always people-
fine-tuned around somebody from reasonable faith. That's a whole nother.
Okay, so we want to
45
talk
minutes.
about the fine-tuning.
No.
Okay.
Okay.
So here's what my first thought when I saw this one was I find the wording of it interesting because they don't say here's a list of things that science has proven wrong in the Bible or has proven wrong about religion. Because when we were talking to Ted Wright, he said if it's in the book, you find it in the ground. Well, there's a lot of things in the Bible that science has finally gotten around to realizing was correct.
You mean like, God being the rule of the earth and its circumference thereof? Or there being waves in the ocean, which was helped discover the concept of currents. I mean, this is or roads in the ocean as it was. And this is not the people weren't devoted, they were idiots. You're talking Abraham was not a dumb guy. These were ziggurat builders. They were doing square 60 mathematics on tables, come with better numbers than we were coming up with today.
I don't even know what that means.
I'm just saying they were using a 60 base that was coming up with far accurate numbers. If God, and I'm going to say this on a thing, this is for all the Christians. If God had not done what he did at Tower of Babel, those people would have been launching rockets in space. They had the technology that they were working on. They were on. Oh, I'm not saying. I'm not talking about the aliens, Graham. It's not our favorite guy. Ancient aliens. No, what we're talking about here is people imagine that people were ignorant in the past. They maybe didn't know or have some of the technology we had today, but ignorance. Tell that to a guy who probably knew math quite well. Abraham, he grew up in those areas. Yeah. And see, what does that matter? It doesn't really matter. It matters if you're measuring in the magnitudes we're trying to measure. That's not a dumb society that does that. That's not stupid.
I think you're right that there is a common trend among anti-religious people today to think of people who lived outside of the modern era as somehow sub-intellectual or moronic. They didn't have the learning that we have
that's
today.
because they think that people came from cavemen.
Well, they've bought into an evolutionary concept of intelligence. And that would be contradicted by the levels of technology each different group has displayed. I mean, it's not an accident. A guy goes, this piece of obsidian pierces pretty good. I cut myself with it. I wonder if I could go cut something else with it. That's logic. I'm gonna put it on a spear. I'm gonna go out. I'm a Clovis person now. I'm gonna put it on a spear. Hey, you know what? I found if I throw this and I lever it, it went even faster. I'm gonna put a lever on this thing. It goes from there all the way up to, mind you, from there to putting ships in space, because that's where it starts. Yeah. They weren't stupid. No. They were looking causationally, observably. Yeah, they were looking at their world around themselves.
The reason that people believe in all the alien stuff, and how many times I got to tell you these are not touchscreen computers.
I tried.
But the reason that, or because they have this view of people in the Bible or ancient times as being idiots, stupid, whatever word you want to use, that's the reason they're so open for the alien theories and the greater mind theories. And I'm going, yeah, there was a greater mind. It's just one you're not willing to accept.
I find it weird the people who wouldn't accept God are quick to throw the alien theory in there. I mean, how much more logical is that? Of course, then again, I'm a really weird person because I talk to my kids about this stuff all the time.
I know you're a really weird
and
person.
And I tell them, I said, now, you can't look at me and tell me that, that we all understand that not one of the angels that got kicked to this world after they rebelled from a cosmic empire ruled by someone that they decided they were going to try and replace, that they're not extraterrestrials. By definition, they are extraterrestrial. I'm sorry. You want to call them angels? I'll call them what they are. They're not from our planet. Well, duh. I mean, duh. If they don't origin here. Moving on. Off of that, back over here. I'm telling you, it's a matter of semantics when you're talking about this stuff with some people. Semantics. Most Christians don't think they believe half the things they believe. They don't believe that they believe in time travel. They don't believe in being transported locations and having dimensional travel. All these things are in the Word of God. Just go check it out. It's just. But who's at the center of it? A person who can do this stuff.
Don't mention time travel. We'll have to break up the chess pieces and salt shakers.
Oh, I disproved the entire movie. Moving on. Christianity. What do we have here? What do you see, Tyson?
Oh, okay.
We got you this time. We got you this time.
I think you did. Oh, man, I'm getting stumped.
You're
here.
done for.
All right. Well, it looks like a picture of Jesus on the cross, or somebody's depiction of Jesus on the cross, probably from The Passion, the movie. And so below the picture, it's kind of formulated, kind of designed like one of those motivational posters. And it says Christianity in big yellow letters, and then below it, it says the belief that a cosmic Jewish zombie who was his own father can make you live forever if you symbolically eat his flesh and telepathically tell him you accept him as your master, so that he can remove from your soul an evil force that is present in humanity because a rib woman was convinced by a talking snake to eat from a magical tree.
Wow.
That's
so take that. Take that.
Well, I'm gonna pack up my stuff and go home, and I'm ruined. I got wrecked. Okay, so the design is pretty clear. It's putting the picture of Jesus, and then below that picture, sort of a paragraph of absurdities, or trying to make Christianity sound absurd with the language that it gives, defining Christianity in absurd terms. So first I would say...
Let's work through his process. What was step number one?
Step number one is the design. So that's the picture and the text below it, like a motivational poster.
I like the big C, the big Y, and then the cramped lettering. It just really grabs you.
Really, yeah.
You know?
Very attractive.
Well, I think one thing about it looking like the motivational posters is we take those things to be true.
Ooh.
Oftentimes.
All right,
and so intellectually, you're looking at it going, okay, whatever it says must be true.
Right.
Or inspiring.
Okay, that was step one.
Okay, step one. Step two is the content. So we listed everything that it said, and clearly it's trying to make Christianity sound absurd. We call this a reductio ad absurdum, where if you can show that something...
Yeah, we call it that all the time, a reductio ad absurdum.
Yeah.
We call it that all the time.
No, I call you other things. It's
hey,
okay.
You know that guy? You know, reductio ad absurdum? Yeah, I remember reductio ad absurdum. Yeah, Dory.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So if you can reduce something to absurdity, then it's irrational to believe.
Right.
All right. So my first response is, step three is the so what. Okay. There's no argument given here.
Yeah, there's not really anything.
Right. It's not presenting an argument that says Christianity is false because. It's just facetiously or satirically saying what some of the beliefs of Christianity are, in the hopes that you'll hear how silly it is when you read it or say it out loud. Some of it is just a complete misunderstanding of Christianity.
No, really?
Yeah, I mean, that you can be that you can live forever by symbolically eating Jesus's flesh, right? That that sounds much like Catholic.
Yeah, that did smack more like the Eucharist.
But definitely not something that Protestants would affirm. That Jesus is a cosmic Jewish zombie. You know,
I love the people that call Jesus a zombie.
What resurrection could mean here.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, and my thing was zombies eat brains, and I don't ever remember it mentioning. You know.
Well, that's a big theme in like comics and some of the drawings. There's whole comic books dedicated to zombie Jesus. I mean, it's just one more stick your finger in the eye of God kind of moment that people love because it's fascinating. It's fascinating. It's fascinating to be disrespectful to something. But then again, they got Abraham Lincoln fighting zombies. Moving on. I'm saying.
Yeah. So moving down a little bit, just analyzing, it says, so that he can remove from your soul an evil force that is present in humanity, because a rib woman was convinced by a talking snake to eat from a magical tree. So that's a particular view of sin, and specifically original sin, that not all Christians agree with.
There's no original sin, because I've done them all before.
That first of all, that God is wants to remove an evil force from your soul, as if sin is some external force that invades you once you're, born or created or whatever. Obviously, when we sin, we do it willfully. It's not an evil force that we somehow inherit through our DNA or something.
You are right about that one.
Yeah, and it's not presenting an argument at all. So first I would say to the person posting this, what argument are you trying to get at? Are you trying to say that Christianity is false? Because none of this is saying that Jesus wasn't a real person, that he wasn't crucified, and that he didn't rise from the dead. So what's your argument? Secondly, I would challenge them to be more charitable in their characterization, right? If I was to say that all atheists believed that, the universe popped into existence uncaused out of nothing, and that we're all evolved from ooze that, became sentient from non-sentient matter, and, just mischaracterized their beliefs in some really silly way, they would probably not appreciate that too much. So maybe asking the same courtesy from them.
Valid point. Man, this has been good. Just getting into some of these memes and thinking more critically about them, and looking at what they have to say and what they don't say.
Yeah.
And looking at that, and most of the people that I'm in my experience that have posted these or posted them at somebody or on somebody's page, usually it's kind of an attack, or it's a little bit of a backhand jab at you for what you believe, or they feel like they're satisfied that they kind of got that dig on you a little bit, or they're amused that you're upset. I think that's another one. Overreaction is amusing to the other side because they feel like that means that you're wrong, or they're just enjoying messing with you.
Yeah. Or
and some people just enjoy that.
Moment.
Yeah, it's gotcha moment. And they're worried, hey, if you got to, and some people believe there are people who believe if you have a got you moment, that you really don't believe something. Yeah. Well, come on now. I mean, we all have moments where it's like, we'll second guess or think about something more critically. Doesn't mean we abandon it. I think any married man, the wedding night, got very critical about what he was about to do. We didn't necessarily abandon our wife, they would get ready to marry. It's like all of a sudden, like, oh, we're really going to do this? But the thing is that, yeah, really, seriously. But the thing is that that a lot of times what happens here is the idea of having a little gap in your logic, or even having that gotcha moment, is that a sign that you don't believe?
Right, yeah.
Or is it a sign that you're a human
right.
and you don't know everything? Or that maybe you might take a minute to learn more about God and what he wants for you.
I was about to say, it might be a kick in the pants to actually try to learn something.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
I mean, but then again, we have some people, and bless them, and they're not even aware of some basics concerning the Word of God itself.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not aware that there's more than one author, that there are other people that wrote, and it was written over time. They have a hard time with these things.
It's not a single book.
Who didn't teach them
Yes, it
that?
is. I got it right there somewhere.
Yeah, and people they're just not aware, and maybe the church doesn't always do a very good job of preparing them. But I can't say your church is guilty of that, because I was at a conference and we were there and learning more about apologetics. Tyson James. James Tyson.
No, Tyson
No,
James.
I got it right.
I know, it's the curse of
Why?
two first names.
Or two last names.
So I did it to one of my sons, right? And I've got my two boys, and they got both names start with N, and it blows my mind because I never get them right. I always averting their names. Anyway, but we really have enjoyed have you come.
Thanks for having me on. Again,
It's
guys.
been fantastic. Oh, you got another meme you drew up. Why? Is it because it's so good?
I do.
I'm
like
trying
this.
to wrap up.
I do
Graham.
like this
The
one.
man's looking tired.
I happen to agree with this one.
Did you ever want to join a book club, but you actually hate reading? Do I have the place for you? And it's a church. I just
in a lot of ways, I actually agree with that one.
I just said that there are people who aren't very.
that's
I
why-
need this one. You need to send that one to me.
That's why I threw that one in there, was just because
One of my favorite things
I
to
think
explain
that's got a
about
lot of validity
one
to
of my
it.
favorite things to explain about biblical authors is to tell people, Nebuchadnezzar is a biblical author. And they'll go, do what? And I'll say, well, in Daniel, he reprints Nebuchadnezzar's letter. It's it's not Daniel writing that section. No. It is the
You're
reprint.
right.
And it's in the first
never
person.
thought about that.
It's in the first person of King Nebuchadnezzar saying, let me tell you what happened to me.
I knew it, but I had never thought about it that way.
Which puts Nebuchadnezzar as a biblical author. What? You know?
Mind blown.
Mind blown.
Maybe we should make a meme.
I am a meme.
A walking meme.
You are a meme. You're right.
All right, thank you so much for coming. And we do want to have you back another time. We know you've just
Absolutely.
really been a fantastic guest. We're so jazzed to have you back again as our first returner to the actual live broadcast, because a dead broadcast just won't do. And Graham, you are getting ready to be in The Living Last
The
Supper.
reason I'm so scruffy, we talked about it all
the backstory.
but the reason
you don't want to see his back. Backstory.
So April the 9th, I think. Is that the Thursday before Easter? Somewhere around there.
We'll go with that.
I think it's April the 9th. Here at First Presbyterian Goldsboro, we're doing a Living Last Supper.
Because
So-
a dead Last
Last
Supper
Supper
just
would be
won't do.
boring.
It would be
Yeah.
boring.
Yeah. I've heard that joke a lot too. But basically what it is we get 13 guys around a table and we pose like the Da Vinci painting.
Uh-huh.
We walk in, we get in pose, the church goes dark. One at a time, the spotlight hits each disciple. You break your pose, you come up, you say a 2 or 3 minute monologue, and then you go back into pose. It's actually a really cool service.
Nice.
This will
Sounds
be
great.
this will be the third year I've been in it. We do it about every other year. This will be the third one I've been in. And I keep telling Miss Rosalind, the director, that I'd really like to see it from the audience side one time, but I don't want to give up my chair in order to do that, because I play Simon the Zealot, which explains my fascination with Simon the Zealot.
Yeah.
And I've really enjoyed it. It's a lot of fun for us. It's a lot of heartaches for us at times.
Oh, man.
But
You gotta sit there for a long time, huh?
it's a long time to sit like this.
Yeah.
You know, and it's about 45 minutes of sitting in pose and I'm number 11 out of 12.
Yeah.
So I'm there for a long time before I get a break. But it's a lot of fun to do. And I think it does give those that do it a new insight into what they were going through that night.
Speaking of that, we're going to be having some of those guys in and interviewing some of them and trying to see if we can interview some of them in character. So to get a feel for what it would be like to sit down with a few of these disciples. And kind of a cool idea. Let them extrapolate on their monologues and give us a little feel for that. I think it's going to be awesome. And I can't wait to be there and get to see you do the performance of a lifetime.
Come in and do an interview though.
No, I hear you enough. All right, again, thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
God bless. We're going to have you back. It's going to be so exciting. I've not forgotten you right across the road from where I live at. I just look over and go, he's over there. Fountain of creepy. Fountain of knowledge.
Don't lock my doors.
I think you might want to.
All right, have a good one, guys. Thanks for listening to the Bunker Brothers. We'll see you another time. Bye.